Up to 20,000 new homes will be built at the current Bukit Timah Turf City. That's over the next 2 to 3 decades. The plans include private homes as well as public housing. The first time such flats will be built in the area in almost 40 years. Announcing this, National Development Minister Desmond Lee says that the aim is to meet Singaporeans' aspirations to live closer to workplaces in the city.
In planning this future estate, we wanted to enhance the living environment, not just for the future residents who will move into the area over time, but also for existing residents who are living around the area. For example, in our engagements with residents living nearby, many shared with us that they look forward to increased connectivity and more amenities, such as retail and community uses, which the new estate will contain.
The new estate will be made up of 4 neighbourhoods, each with public spaces integrated with the existing landscape and heritage buildings. At the racecourse neighbourhood, for example, the iconic North Grandstand and a new oval will form its centrepiece. Once the site of racetracks, it will accommodate recreational spaces and sports facilities, and it will also be located next to the upcoming Cross Island Line MRT station. And the next neighbourhood, the Stables Commune, that will be located along Dunnan Road and close to the existing 6th Avenue MRT station. Now, like its name suggests, it will be built where the former stables and workers' quarters were. Now, in future, they will house small-scale lifestyle offerings. Let's get on to the third neighbourhood now. That will have a rustic vibe. The Saddle Club Knolls will sit on rolling terrain and be situated just next to Aineo Forest. It's intended as a lifestyle and gathering space where family-friendly activities can perhaps be held. Heritage buildings here will also be incorporated into those plans. Now, lastly, we go to the foothills of Bukit Tinggi, which sit on former golf course land. Residents here will get good views of the Central Catchment Nature Reserve and the flora and fauna of Bukit Tinggi.
We want to create a more people-centric environment in Bukit Timah Turf City. New public spaces will be designed to recall the unique character of Turf City while facilitating community bonding. We have considered feedback from residents living nearby during our engagements and will ensure that the estate is sensitively developed with regard to the surrounding residential areas.
27 heritage buildings and structures in the area could be retained and integrated with the future development. It's among recommendations by heritage groups who were consulted on the Turf City plans. Now, they point to the 176-hectare site's significant heritage as Singapore's second racecourse from 1933 to 1999. The North Grandstand, which held thousands of spectators in its heyday, is among the structures being studied. Authorities are also looking to retain the stables that used to house racehorses, as well as the bungalows where former staff used to live in, and the Bukit Timah Saddle Club clubhouse. There could also be storyboards and heritage trails to further document the heritage of the area. The National Development Minister says that it is an example of how the government approaches land use.
Within our 734 square kilometres, we will need to provide for all the things that a fully functioning country requires. At the same time, we need to meet the growing needs and aspirations of Singaporeans who are becoming more diverse. As our land pressures intensify, necessitating more trade-offs, we need to explore more varied approaches to land use, such as rejuvenating existing developments and redeveloping brownfield sites.
An urban planning expert says that the plans would be tricky to execute due to the number of existing infrastructural elements involved. This could lengthen the time taken to develop the area. URA says that it will retain most of Aineo Avenue Forest and Bukit Tinggi in its Turf City draft plans. These are 2 forested areas that are home to more than 200 plants and animal species, and they would be at risk during such a development. Retaining them is part of efforts to conserve the area's natural flora and fauna and limit the impact of development plans on their habitats. URA will also study how the two forested areas could be integrated into a future park network. The development plans will also connect Enyo Avenue Forest and Bukit Tinggi with a new 400-metre-long eco-link. Beyond conserving these forests, selected landscapes of the former Turf Club, like the Fairways Quarters courtyard, will also be transformed into green recreational spaces. Our URA is inviting Singaporeans to share their views on the draft plans, including the heritage and environmental impact assessments, from now through June the 20th. And for more on this, I'm joined by Dr. Ho Chi Tim. He is Senior Lecturer at the Singapore University of Social Sciences. And also joining me tonight is Edward Tee. He is Associate Professor of Law at the Singapore Management University. He is also Urban Fellow at the SMU Urban Institute. Good evening to you, gentlemen. Dr. Ho, let us start with you. 27 heritage buildings and structures. They're going to be studied for potential retention and reuse as well. What are some factors that the authorities are going to have to consider here? And are these sites worth conserving?
Hi, Don. Thank you. These sites are definitely worth conserving, especially if they are places where people and communities live, work, play, and interact with each other. And in the process of those interactions, they created connections, invoked strong feelings and emotions, attachments to the area, and creating precious memories and stories. So these personal stories and memories, especially if they are compelling, can bolster also the broader narratives that are the Singapore story or Singapore's history, such as sporting history or the equestrian history of leisure and recreation, also a bit of a social and economic history as well, and also definitely of philanthropy, the presence of the tote board. So yes, to answer the question, it is worth conserving these sites as physical markers of these connections, emotions and stories.
Right.
So these are some of the factors the authorities would or have already considering in their efforts, engaging the communities who live and work there before, and getting their memories and their stories.
Yeah, they may have already seen some of those compelling narratives. Dr. Ho, Associate Professor Tee, let's bring you in on the conversation here. From an urban planning perspective, what are some challenges perhaps and also opportunities that would come from developing what's being called a brownfield site?
Yeah, thanks, Don. I think by brownfield site, we're really talking about the fact that you have existing buildings as opposed to a greenfield kind of development. So from the challenges perspective and the opportunities, they overlap a little bit, because you want to treat the buildings which are going to be conserved in a respectful manner. We know that the buildings originate since 1933, so this is a pre-war building. And we think about what conservation is for the next generation, it's for tourists, it's for Singaporeans to understand what our past is like. So how do we treat these buildings respectfully while retaining their function without letting them become white elephants? That's certainly a challenge. In terms of the opportunities, we know that the site is interesting because of the buildings and also because of the surrounding areas. So there's a twofold opportunity here. It's certainly attractive to stay in a site with conserved buildings. And we also know that about 1/3 of the whole area will be left as green space. So you have a low density kind of area, you have these beautiful buildings, and it's going to be very attractive. And being in the Bukit Timah area, you are going to be near a series of well-known schools. So there will be demand, there will be strong take-up, and those are the opportunities for the developer. If I say a little bit about public housing, because there's both challenges and opportunities in respect of public housing as well. Urban scholars talk about this concept of democratizing the city, right? And this is a very important aspect. We are introducing HDB flats in Bukit Timah for the first time in almost 4 decades. But we want to distribute these flats in a way which is as equitable as possible. How do we minimize this lottery effect? And this is where your prime categorization of HDB flats comes in as well. So it's a very complicated, multifaceted, multi-agency approach that the government, together with the private sector, has to work together.
It seems that a very delicate sort of balance has to be struck here, considering the heritage value of the area. Dr. Ho, let's bring you back in on the conversation here. There is existing infrastructure there already. How is all of that going to affect development from a heritage standpoint?
It has been, I was thinking about the question, I think it has been, the area has been developed at least one time, or at least the grandstands have been repurposed at least once, I think, for commercial and recreational purposes from horse racing before. So, from a heritage does not stand still. It will take on new meanings as people or different communities reuse and repurpose those buildings around. So when the horse racing and the supporting infrastructure and communities moved to Kranji, the other people moved in, the restaurants, and I also remember there's some ex throwing kind of company down there, and restaurants there, and other facilities for children and families. So it has been repurposed. So the original existing structures and the buildings were given new purpose. And from there, if we take the view that heritage can evolve, it's not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah. So even as heritage can evolve, once that area is developed, it's going to mean more footfall. It's going to mean perhaps, accommodating for more traffic, although they want it to be car light, right? Even so, they're going to have to put in place some infrastructure. Associate Professor T, what kind of changes do you anticipate as the government tries to sort of balance that car light area, but also the need to kind of, put in place the right amount of roads and space so that there are going to be more people living there?
Yeah, that's a great question, Don. Well, we know for sure that the government is going to put in walking and cycling connections. Other than that, perhaps improve the park connector network. And I think when we are forecasting 20, 30 years' time, Singapore is already an aging society. We're going to be even more aged at that point in time. So we need to have elder-friendly accessibility. Maybe things like buggies within the community, because it's hot in Singapore. You want the elderly to walk, but you also understand the limitations. Perhaps staggered school starting times as a kind of social infrastructure, because there are a lot of schools there. And obviously, you're going to see, I think, electric car charging points. My personal hope is, of course, we have more roundabouts. I'm a big fan of roundabouts compared to traffic lights. And I think within the estate, roundabouts will be interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, the only one that I know of is at Newton Circus right now. Dr. Ho, Chi Tim from the Singapore University of Social Sciences, and Associate Professor Edward T from Singapore Management University. Thank you both very much.